You want us to do what Kaz's translucent membranes flickered, and the human instructor's reaction was one of wide-eyed disbelief. Lieutenant Winters stifled a sigh as he repeated patiently, "It's a simple combat immersion exercise. You'll be divided into two teams. One will defend the hill and the other will attempt to capture." This was 4 months into the exchange program, and the aliens continued to act as if every standard human military exercise was some kind of elaborate torture device meant to break their various non-human anatomy. In this gravity scenario, the prefab floor groaned as a large drari shifted its weight, making the assembled party to sigh. The creature's vocalization came over the translator with a peculiar whining tone, "And your planet pulls at one." Winters rubbed the bridge of her nose and said, "We've been over this." A slender Allen raised a tentacle-like appendage and said, "I must inquire about the ambient temperature during this exercise. My species requires all environmental concerns to be accommodated in your specialized combat suits." Winters cut in, having heard variations of this particular concern at least once, and her exoskeleton wasn't created for extended combat in such conditions. At least 50 times in the last week, the Galactic Alliance customized these training suits to accommodate your unique physiologies. A group of 23 extraterrestrials hailing from 7 different species mumbled something or other. Through the use of universal translators, the noises were transformed into what Winters could only identify as the distinct whine of privileged officer candidates bemoaning the imposition of actual labor. The bird-like avari, whose brilliant plumage was always fluffed whenever winter was around, chirped, "We're here to learn about human customs and culture, not engage in primitive physical combat scenarios." Winters took a deep breath, explaining that combat training is essential for understanding how the Galactic Alliance approaches joint military operations. This is a typical exercise that human recruits complete during their first month of basic training. "You're joking, Kazel. We've only been on Earth for 16 weeks, and the gelatinous form of Blorp the Keon representative ripples with what Winter has come to recognize as their version of horror. The course you'll be running today is actually the easy version. We've removed the live fire elements, reduced the mud crawl section by 60%, and limited the environmental hazards to light rain instead of the standard thunderstorm setting." The aliens stare at her in silence. "This must be an example of human humor." Winters said, her smile falling just short of her eyes. "I promise you I'm being totally serious. In fact, I've invited some of our actual first Monon recruits to demonstrate the course before you attempt it." As if on cue, the doors to the training facility slid open, and 20 human recruits jogged in perfect unison. The majority of them appeared to be in their teens, but they exuded an air of unmistakable poise that could only come from having served even a brief stint in the military. "This is our newest group of recruits," Winters said. "They've been training for exactly 26 days. Today they'll show you the combat immersion course you'll be trying out. After that, Trill's feathers pressed against her body in distress, but they're so tiny." Sergeant Davis marched in behind them, and the humans stood up with military precision, startling some of the extraterrestrial delegates. An awkward silence ensued as one of the human recruits, a young woman with short hair, couldn't help but crack a sly smile. "No, sir," she said, her jaw still twitching slightly. "I was a ballet dancer before I joined the military," she added. "You seem concerned about human physical capabilities," the diplomatic delegate said, hissing. The aliens looked at each other in confusion as their translators struggled to find words for ballet in 7 different alien languages. A performer of aesthetic physical movements, she was once an entertainer. Now she's a warrior, and the question is how one goes from making art to learning combat. Thompson shrugged and said, "Ballet is more physically demanding than most combat training." The aliens exchanged confused glances, and Winters asked Sergeant Davis to take a look. "Recruits, please report to the starting position and commence the exercise. When you are ready, Sir Davis," she said, and the human soldiers bolted out of the room. Winters motioned for the alien delegation to join her on the observation deck, which faced the training ground below. Looking down from the vantage point, one could see an intentionally constructed hellscape, a hillside that had been turned into an obstacle course with every conceivable nasty feature, including mud pits, razor wire climbing walls, water, and more. There were obstacles and buildings that seemed made to be hard to navigate. This is the simplified version. Blork's transparent body trembled, and Winters confirmed that we've reduced some features to make it easier for you to try it out. Castle leaned against the observation window, and Winters explained that what's covering a lot of ground is actually just dirt and water. Castle didn't seem to understand. Amidst the cacophony of electronic chirps and warbles, the idea of using SK skincare products for humans was presented by Winter, who couldn't resist. Some humans spend a pretty penny at high-end spas to get similar mixes applied to their bodies. Meanwhile, below ground, the human recruits had formed two teams and were positioned themselves. A klaxon signaled their imminent action, and the defending team swiftly took up position on top of the hill, while the attacking force started to negotiate the treacherous terrain. The aliens watched in a mix of horror and fascination as the human recruits crawled through mud-scaled walls, swung across water hazards, and engaged in simulated combat. When struck by the non-lethal training weapons, the recruits momentarily registered the hit. The course included surprising rising speed and coordination, as if a cosmic egg had whispered, "Trill." Winter nodded, and humans are persistent predators by evolution. Before continuing their advance without a break, they simply keep moving forward. Gar's jaws clenched in bewilderment as he was shot, but Winters clarified that those were training weapons. In actual combat, they would be rendered powerless by actual weapon fire. On the training ground, a human recruit twisted her ankle after slipping in the mud. She grimaced in pain, but crawled forward, finishing her section of the mission. At the defensive perimeter, the human attackers were engaged in close-quarters combat simulations, despite being covered in mud, visibly exhausted, and experiencing minor injuries. Dex, the Scyther delegate, wondered why she didn't withdraw for medical attention. She explained that such injuries are expected during training, and that if necessary, she will report to medical later. Several aliens appeared at the same time, a coordinated fury that appeared to unsettle the extraterrestrial onlookers. Are they enjoying it? Winters watched as a muddy recruit triumphantly hoisted the flag aloft, inspiring cheers from his teammates despite their fatigue. 30 minutes later, the human recruits had finished their demonstration and were now standing at attention in the main hall of the training facility, still dripping mud and water onto the floor. Despite their disheveled appearance, they kept their perfect poise. The alien delegation appeared shell-shocked in contrast to the formation's back straight and eyes forward. Winters cheerfully announced, "It's your turn now. You can't be serious?" Trill's feathers were pressed so flat against her body that she appeared half her normal size. Very seriously, Winters confirmed, as I mentioned, that we've adjusted the course to accommodate your different physiological differences. The Galactic Alliance training suits you're wearing will offer extra support and environmental controls, but this is Kazil raised an objection, and one of the human recruits, a tall, broad-shouldered young man, made a noise that sounded like a suppressed laugh. Recruit Miller Winters inquired, "No, sir." Miller stared straight ahead and asked, "Are you sure?" Miller hesitated before asking for permission to speak freely. The aliens were granted it, and Miller turned slightly to address them with respect. "This is just basic training," he said. "Where I grew up in rural Alaska, my brothers and I would do tougher stuff than this for fun on weekends for fun." The aliens looked at Miller in horror as he grew up in one of our more extreme environments. Miller then faltered, uncertain of how to address a gelatinous alien. Winter supplied the appropriate address, saying, "Yes, delegate. Back home, we would race through similar terrain to reach our favorite fishing spots, sometimes in sub-zero temperatures. The mud actually felt nice after being used to ice water. We've adapted to thrive in wildly varying conditions." "Is this true?" Krill asked, looking around at the other recruits. "Do you all enjoy these physical hardships?" Thompson, the former ballet dancer, shot back. "No, I wouldn't say that." But he continued, "There's satisfaction in pushing your limits, in knowing you can endure more than you thought possible. It builds unit cohesion. Sharing hardships," he said, "creates bonds. Nothing like crawling through mud together to form friendships." Nodding, she pointed towards the training ground's exit, saying, "Your equipment is ready?" If the alien delegates who had looked hesitant before now appear on the verge of interstellar diplomatic incidents, as they stand at the starting line of the combat course, despite being outfitted in the most advanced adaptive training suits the Galactic Alliance could provide. This was to emphasize that the Galactic Alliance had requested that we incorporate our approach into their joint training program. As Winters was about to sound the starting klaxon, she yelled out, "Remember, we're going to be judged not only on our individual performance, but also on how well we work together as a team." In response, Gur raised a large clawed appendage and asked, "What happens if we just refuse?" Winter smiled pleasantly and said, "Then I'll be submitting our performance evaluations to you. Your military command suggesting that you failed to complete even the most fundamental human training exercises. I'm sure that will do wonders for your careers." Giar's jaws clicked in what might have been a resignation sound. Winters asked no other questions. On my mark, 3, 2, 1, beginning the klaxon sounded, and what followed could be generously described as organized chaos. The alien delegates, similar to the human recruits, were divided into attack and defense teams and started the course with varying degrees of success. On the observation deck, Sergeant Davis and Winters watched the spectacle with varying degrees of competence. Davis commented, "It's painful to watch," as gelatinous Keon tried to test the depth of the first mud pit by extending pseudopods, but they lost cohesion and spread out across the surface like spilt jelly. Winter said, "We'll figure it out," but she didn't sound entirely convinced. Trill used her wings to hover over obstacles instead of going through them, and Krill appeared to be. The prospect of submerging his transparent membranes in mud caused Delegate Trill Winters to call over the communication system, stating that flying is not allowed during the exercise unless your species is unable to move on land. Davis muttered something about how long it would take, and Winters agreed, saying that this is the most important point for them to understand. An unexpected development was taking place in the course. After the initial shock and resistance, some of the aliens began to adapt. The massive Drari, who had griped about Earth's gravity, found that his exoskeleton could be used to plow through obstacles, allowing the humans to move more cautiously. He began to clear paths through the mud pits so that the smaller aliens could follow. Dex, the synth with mechanical augmentations, determined the most efficient routes, and Winters nodded in agreement as she watched Krill, the most outspoken complainer, use his transparent membranes to create sails that propelled smaller team members across a water hazard. "This was the entire point, Sergeant," she said, "that adversity is a chance for growth." Davis expressed surprise that the group was beginning to work together, and Blorp, after reassembling into a more cohesive form, discovered that their amorphous body could fit through narrow passages that others had to climb over. The exercise lasted nearly 3 hours longer than the human recruits, but at the end of it, both alien teams had accomplished their goals. The defensive team had built barricades that were surprisingly effective using techniques that humans would never think of. By the end of the exercise, the attacking team had developed coordination strategies that took advantage of their diverse physiologies. Capturing the flag was no picnic for any alien delegate, but to everyone's surprise, they seemed pleased with themselves. Trill, whose feathers were caked in mud, chirped as she tried to brush them off in the facility's cleaning area, but that wasn't too bad. The other delegates, who were in varying degrees of post-exercise mess, murmured in agreement. The second mud pit was actually pretty pleasant once I adjusted my body density, and Blorp admitted that their gelatinous form was mostly clean. After a specialized sonic shower, did you notice how I diverted attention with my mandibles, while Krill defended the defensive position? Grin excitedly clicked, seemingly forgetting his earlier gripes about Earth's gravity. Winters leaned against the doorway, looking satisfied as he observed this unexpected camaraderie. You orchestrated this, didn't you? KZ approached her, his membranes mostly free of mud and pulsating with what seemed like newfound respect. Winters innocently asked, leading us to believe it would be ridiculously difficult to show us. It's a psychological component disguised as a physical challenge that Syl noticed clever humans have been doing to themselves for millennia. Winters said that we push boundaries to see what's on the other side. Sometimes it's disaster, but usually it's growth. It's why your human recruits perform at levels we thought were impossible, and then we find out we can not only finish the course, but also find our own ways to excel at it. The species' rapid advancement after joining the Galactic Alliance was questioned by GR, who wanted to know what other species had accomplished in centuries. Winters partially admitted, but also said that it was partly due to the fact that humans never assume something is impossible simply because it's difficult. The translators struggled for a moment, but Winters clarified that humans often attempt dangerous or seemingly impossible tasks just to prove they can be done, especially when others doubt them. This explains a lot about human behavior in the Alliance, according to Trill, who was asked about the species' rapid advancement after joining. Winters straightened up. The Galactic Alliance has been around for almost 10,000 years, and in that time there have been threats beyond our borders that have not been negotiated. These threats require physical and mental resilience, which many Alliance species have forgotten. The aliens grew quiet, and the hive mind expansion at the Cygnis border decks has been quiet as well. Lieutenant Cazell asked, suddenly suspicious, "What impossible task are you preparing us for?" With a steady hand, Cazell remarked, "Despite being the newest, least advanced Alliance species, we're not the least advanced in all areas." In response, Winters nodded intelligently and suggested that the Alliance will reach space within 5 years. He went on to say that technological advantages and philosophical debates won't be enough, and that they'll need soldiers who can adapt, endure, and overcome regardless of the planet they evolved on. Humans are helping to prepare them for this. Regarding technology and comfort, both methods have their merits. Today's exercise was a mere first step, but tomorrow's will expand upon what you learnt today. The assembled aliens let out a collective groan, but Winters carried on smiling. Now let's talk about another human tradition, social bonding through the shared consumption of mild intoxicants. Blorp cautiously inquired, "What is this?" And Winters replied, "Brewery." The room felt an immediate lift as this GR announced. The following morning, Winters had to face the alien delegation in the briefing room of the training facilities. This was despite the fact that the previous evening's festivities had gone on far into the night, and all 23 aliens had shown up on time, though they were all showing signs of what humans would call a hangover. Without further ado, Winters announced today's exercise, which would expand upon using the facility's gravity manipulation systems to recreate conditions ranging from 0.3 to 2. We will be expanding upon yesterday's fundamentals with the addition of simulated combat scenarios in variable gravity conditions. Instead of the chorus of complaints she had grown to expect, Winters was met with attentive silence. 0. Earth Standard. She went on to say that every team will face unexpected changes as they try to accomplish their goals. Kazil asked if we would be put into the same teams as yesterday, but Winters said no, that today's teams will be mixed, so that everyone learns to work with different people. The point, she said, is to be flexible and adaptable. Dex made a comment about how mechanical eyes adjusting with a soft, where consistency would be a good approach. Winters blinked briefly because she was surprised by the lack of opposition. "Exactly, I've posted our team assignments on your neural interfaces. You have 30 minutes to get ready before we start." Winters felt a presence next to her as they started to review their assignments and form new groups. Sergeant Davis appeared impressed, but also suspicious. "What did you do to them?" Lieutenant Davis whispered. "Yesterday they were prepared to lodge formal diplomatic protests over the mud, but now they're willing to accept variable gravity combat scenarios without a peep of complaint." In response, Winters smiled and said, "I didn't do a thing. They learnt it on their own." This signifies that humans learn something early, but many other species never. On the other side of the room, GR was showing smaller aliens how to use their exoskeleton strength to provide mobile cover during high-gravity phases. Davis looked skeptical at first, but after completing the muddy obstacle course, they became enthusiastic space marines. It's not exactly what Winters said, but when you experience the satisfaction of overcoming a challenge, it becomes addictive. A soft chime signaled the end of the preparation period. Delegates were asked to take their positions. Winters announced that exercise would begin in 5 minutes. The aliens approached the training area with surprising eagerness, and Davis shook his head in wonder as he watched in astonishment as they adapted to Winters' correction and used their unique physiologies as advantages instead of limitations. This was exactly what we had hoped would happen. Aimed at making extraterrestrials more human-like, however, Winters saw this as less human-like and more integrated. The Galactic Alliance had spent millennia perfecting its members' unique strengths while simultaneously engineering their weaknesses. This strategy worked until a threat emerged that exploited those weaknesses. Davis came to the same conclusion: the hive mind disregards diplomatic protocols and technological advantages in favor of sheer adaptability and persistence, which could lead to overwhelming. The traits that humans still possess can be attributed to our stubbornness and relative inexperience on the galactic stage. Davis nodded slowly, understanding that we are guiding them to rediscover their more primitive and complete abilities, which they in turn teach us. This is the theory that Winter put forth as they made their way to the observation deck, explaining that the Galactic Alliance values humanity's contributions regardless of how advanced they may be. Team Alpha is prepared to proceed. Team Beta is also prepared, and there is additional GR from the opposing side. Lieutenant, the communication system crackled with Kilk voice, and Winters smiled as she activated the klaxon. Perhaps the Galactic Alliance could find hope after all. The alien delegates below them had taken their positions, each team comprised of a mix of species. Yesterday there had been reluctance and complaint, but today there was focus and determination. Standing rigidly in the Galactic Alliance High Command Chamber, Winters attempted to keep his composure in the face of 7 planetary representatives with a combined age in the centuries. The circular room, with its high ceiling and elaborate technological displays, was meant to intimidate, and it succeeded. Lieutenant Winters introduced High Commander Zorx, a Scyther whose mechanical augmentations shone under the soft lighting of the chamber. "We have reviewed your final reports on the cross-species." High Commander Winters acknowledged that new approaches often meet resistance initially, and several delegates filed complaints during the early phases of the program. Winters kept her expression neutral and said, "Yes, High Commander, your methods were unorthodox." Zorax's mechanical eyes wobbled as they focused on her face. However, by the program's conclusion, these same delegates had submitted evaluations that were overwhelmingly positive. Why was this a very human perspective? Observed the Allen representative tentacles undulating gently. Discomfort as a pathway to growth, with respect. Winters responded, "It's not exclusively human. Every species represented in this chamber evolved through overcoming environmental obstacles, and the delegates found that physical and mental challenges, while uncomfortable, revealed capabilities they didn't know they possessed both individually and as a coordinated unit. It's clear that humans haven't had enough time to engineer that process into our development." A whisper went through the Avari representatives' ranks, raising the question of whether they believe that advanced civilizations diminish themselves as a result of their own progress rather than being diminished by it. As Winters pointed out, specialized knowledge is rewarded in stable environments, but adaptability is more valuable in times of rapid environmental change, such as the one approaching with the hive mind. Winters felt a surge of vindication, but kept her expression neutral as the delegates worked extremely hard. The High Command exchanged glances, and Winters wondered if she'd overstepped. Criticizing millennia of Galactic Alliance evolution wasn't the safest career move. Zorx finally said something interesting. The results of your program appear to validate this perspective. Multi-species combat units trained under your protocols have demonstrated a 74% increase in effectiveness during simulated hive mind encounters. The Avari representative fluffed her feathers, but I still maintain that crawling through mud is an undignified activity for sentient beings, and I countered the Drari's claims that your training methodology should be expanded to all Galactic Alliance defense forces. Zorro confirmed that the Alliance faces its greatest threat in 10 millennia, and we cannot afford to ignore effective preparation methods just because they involve discomfort. Zorax agreed so strongly that they have unanimously recommended this expansion, and Winters hadn't expected all defense forces to involve millions of personnel across hundreds of worlds. Representing our family, I am pleased to inform you that your position has been elevated to that of Commander, and you have been appointed Director of the newly formed Galactic Alliance Adaptive Combat Training Division. Winters bit the inside of her cheek to contain her smile, as Lieutenant Winters Zorx continued by saying that the High Command had decided on a course of action for future cross-species combat training. After months of pushing alien delegates beyond, Winters recognizes the challenge in the High Commander's tone and the subtle humor behind it. Your mission, Zorx continued, will be to implement your training methods across all Alliance defense forces, with a priority on units stationed along the Sinise border. You will have whatever resources you require. High Commander, the Hive Mind will reach our borders within 4 years. We have a lot of work to do. Her shoulders straightened as she accepted the opportunity to grow through hardship. No, sir, it's not too difficult. It's just properly challenging. Excellent, Zorax grinned, or at least made a complicated reconfiguration of facial components at the prospect of her new assignment. Sir, she added, there's one additional component to your new assignment. The High Command believes this exchange of knowledge should be bidirectional. As you teach the Alliance forces human methods of physical and mental training, we will be providing Earth with advanced technological and strategic knowledge that has been withheld from your species. Winters couldn't hide her surprise. The Aloran representatives waved their tentacles dismissively following standard protocol for newly admitted species. Certain technologies are restricted until we reach appropriate thresholds in cultural and ethical development. High Command has determined that humanity's contribution to Alliance defense merits accelerated access to these technologies. Tier 3 technologies, such as advanced BI neural interfaces, preliminary star-folding principles, and limited gravity manipulation, were once the stuff of science fiction. Winter, clinging to her composure, felt the weight of the world on her shoulders as she pondered the implications of these developments, which, according to the Galactic Alliance, would propel human development forward by centuries. As the High Command departed from the chamber, Winters stayed alert, her mind racing with the implications of her new role. She had begun with 23 hesitant alien delegates in a muddy obstacle course, and now she was responsible for preparing the entire Galactic Alliance for interstellar war. Talk about challenging yourself to advance in your career. A gentle chime signaled an approaching threat, communicating through her neural interface. Winter received a message from Qu'ils, who is currently serving as a combat instructor on his home world. The message was brief, but it made Winter smile broadly. Congratulations, Commander. We told them you were the right human for the job. Winter then laughed as she prepared to reply, Congratulations accepted. You haven't seen anything yet about the mud. She could practically hear Syl's membranes fluttering in resignation across the vast distance. Space exploration. Humanity's place in the stars was not due to superior technology or ancient wisdom, but to a simple, stubborn refusal to believe that anything was too difficult to attempt. Now the Galactic Alliance was about to find out how far that stubborn determination could take them all. Somehow, Winter suspected that there would be a lot of mud involved until the end.